Imagine walking into your own home, sliding the heavy deadbolts into place, and vanishing completely before the sun comes up. No broken windows, no forced entry. Every lock remains perfectly engaged. Arun was a man of the 21st century. He was a pragmatist who trusted hard evidence, logic, and the reliability of the physical world. To him, the unexplained was simply something that hadn't been measured yet. He bought the property because the price was an absolute steal. The local villagers tried to warn him about the house's history, but Arun just laughed. He viewed their ancient stories as a useful tool for driving down the market value of rural real estate. He arrived home late one evening. The sky was choked with heavy black clouds, and the entire neighborhood was silent. He stepped through the front door and secured the locks, moving through the shadows with the ease of someone who believes they are entirely alone. Arun stepped into the dark with the absolute confidence of a man who believes every shadow has a simple, mechanical explanation. He saw his skepticism as a superior perspective, unaware that his refusal to acknowledge the house's history left him completely unprepared for what was already inside. The moment he closed the door, a sharp, freezing gale slammed into his face. It carried a deep, unnatural cold that seemed to bypass his clothes and settle directly into his bones. His mind immediately reached for a rational anchor. He stood still in the hallway, trying to remember if he'd left a bathroom window cracked or if the real estate agent had been by earlier that afternoon. This blueprint reveals the flaw. Every window was fully latched. There was no physical path for a draft. Suddenly, the wind died. The hallway returned to a heavy silence, broken only by the ticking clock and a creaking ceiling fan. Arun stood in the center of the room, his eyes darting between the sealed windows, his breath beginning to hitch as his internal logic struggled to map the current reality. He checked the locks again, his knuckles turning white against the cold brass. The silence brought with it a new sensation, the physical weight of being watched. It felt as if the shadows in the corners of the room were leaning in toward him. He aggressively tried to reclaim his composure. He flipped on every light in the living room and forced himself to sit on the sofa, staring at the floor and waiting for his heart rate to level out. Then, from the floor directly above his head, came a sound that shattered his calm. Tuck, tuck, tuck. Heavy, deliberate footsteps pacing across the upstairs bedroom. He shouted a challenge up the stairs, his voice cracking in the empty house. No one answered. He pulled out his phone, switched on the high-intensity flashlight, and moved toward the staircase to confront the intruder. Every step felt incredibly heavy, the flashlight beam jittered against the peeling wallpaper as he forced himself upward, his pulse thumping in his ears. By choosing to climb those stairs instead of running for the exit, Arun committed himself to the house. He was no longer a resident. He was a participant in whatever the house had planned. He pushed open the bedroom door and swept the light across the room. It was empty of people, but the walls were covered in fresh, violent gouges. The wallpaper had been shredded into ribbons by what looked like frantic, desperate fingernails. In the center of the wall hung a large antique mirror. The glass was spiderwebbed with deep, jagged cracks that distorted everything it reflected. Arun stepped toward the glass, his light catching his own fractured image. But in the mirror's shards, he saw a girl in a white dress standing directly behind him, her hair draped like a veil. He spun around, swinging his flashlight through the empty air. The room was physically vacant. The mirror was showing him a reality that simply did not exist in the room with him. Pure terror took over. He bolted down the stairs, throwing himself toward the front door, desperate to reach the safety of the street. He grabbed the handle and yanked with all his weight. The door didn't budge. The deadbolt he had turned himself was now fused shut, as if the metal had become part of the frame. A dry, rasping whisper came from the shadows behind him. "You cannot leave." He turned to find the girl from the mirror standing inches away, her eyes pitch black, and her face streaked with blood. A freezing hand reached out and touched his cheek. and Arun's world went black. In those final seconds, the physical laws Arun lived by collapsed entirely, leaving him paralyzed by a reality he had spent his life mocking. The sun rose the next morning over a perfectly quiet house. A few concerned neighbors eventually walked up the drive, curious about the man who had ignored their warnings. When they reached the porch, they found the front door, the same door that had been an immovable wall for Arun, swinging wide open in the breeze. They searched every inch of the property. Arun was gone. No signs of a struggle, absolutely no blood, and no footprints leading away. They found only 2 clues upstairs. A fresh "Help Me" was carved into the shredded wallpaper, and in the center of the room, the cracked mirror now held the clear, motionless silhouettes of 2 figures looking out from behind the glass. Arun's belief in modern logic didn't save him. It only served to isolate him. He learned that dismissing the stories of the past doesn't make them go away. It just makes you the next person to live inside them.